We have a report at this point that was scheduled to be our Supervisor of Elections, Kathy Dent. My understanding is that Ms. Dent is not feeling well, has laryngitis and a lot of difficulty talking, and she has sent a representative here to talk to us, Scott Farrington, and my understanding is you have a whole presentation for us.
Yes, I do. Kathy Dent is very disappointed she could not come here today. She does have pneumonia, so she does have an excuse. What we have done, since the RFPs were canceled, we went back to each of the vendors and tried to get the best pricing that we could, idea of pricing from each of the vendors that we could. We had them give us different prices depending on how we might decide to go. The first option is a lease of all 4 years. That's the first column across all of the vendors, a lease of all 4 elections through 2008. The next column is if we were...
Before you go on, beyond that first column, I mean, you say initial cost, and then you have after state fund, the amount is exactly the same. I guess that's because you lose it. Then the purchase upgrade cost, 2.9, is that just added those two things together?
It is not. What 2.9 is, if you want to go down line by line, if you look at the initial cost, that's what the county is initially going to have to spend in this option in order to lease the equipment through 2008. Because we do not get reimbursement from the state, the after-state funds amount is identical. And then, again, the purchase upgrade line would be what would be required at that point to bring us up to the most current system. And that would be paid after the initial cost, after the period of whichever option.
Hey, but that would be the newest system that they would have available at that time. What if you purchased the Diebold, the older system?
If you purchase the older system, if you look at the next column, that's actually purchasing their current system, their older system at $2.7 million. Instead of having the purchase upgrade cost of 2.9, you would have a purchase upgrade cost of 2.7 if you were to lease everything and purchase. ES&S is again doing a very similar thing.
So the total cost of going with either the second or the third column, if you stick with Diebold, is $1.7 million, basically, either way?
Yes, that's the way, and again, the proposals were created. It does look a little unusual, however, I know all of the vendors are very interested in our county, and so they have made some arrangements that I wouldn't have expected normally.
Commissioner Barbetta?
And that's where I'm going. Speaking of unusual, something doesn't jive, because if you look at column 1, and go all the way down, you're $2.5 million higher with Diebold. If you look at column 3 and go all the way down, you're double if you go with Diebold. Right. But if you look at column 2, you're $200,000 less if you go with Diebold. Why the inconsistency?
I don't know why. All I know is this is the way they chose to do it. I'm not sure if they're trying perhaps to encourage us to go a certain route.
That's a major. I mean,
it is a major.
$2.5 million in column 1 is the difference, and $800 and some thousand in column 2 or column 3. Why did such a discrepancy in the two companies in 2 circumstances, but in a third circumstance it's just the opposite?
Right.
And it doesn't seem to be consistent. Something's wrong with that picture.
I agree. It does look a little unusual. All I can say is that we have had the proposals for approximately 2 to 3 weeks. We got them at little different times, but we have looked over them very thoroughly. We've gone back and asked questions. I tend to wager that any one of these options, if you chose, you could probably negotiate further.
The difference in state funding with Diebold versus ES&S reimbursement, why is that?
You're talking the second column?
Second column, 941 versus 520.
The difference there is the older equipment, we are allowed up to $941,000 in reimbursement. The ES&S M100s cost significantly less than their newer counterparts.
And the bottom line, significantly more.
And part of that is because we don't get as much of the state funding. option because we don't.
Right, but even if you correct for that, it's significantly more. Even if you take 400,000 off of the bottom line in column 2 for the ES&S, you've still got $1.5 million, which is more than the 963, where you got a full credit from the state of 940.
Right. The 963 is under the understanding we're basically agreeing to purchase upfront.
So that second column, you're purchasing the old system?
Yes.
And it's going to cost you more than purchasing a new system?
Yes.
Charming. Commissioner Thaxton?
How long of a term do you think we would be able to negotiate maintaining the old system and still keep the full trade-in value for the new system?
This is just a guess, and having said that, this 1.29 million is a verbal. This was not put in their proposal. They said they would they would put a trade-in in their proposal, but they never said how much. So this is coming from a verbal agreement or a verbal understanding. My guess would be probably not too much past 2008. And again, these were their original numbers, and I wager that they didn't look at them in the detail as which way looks more advantageous, as much as a matter of fact we are. And if they were to go back and look at them, for instance, the Diebold's first column, I'm sure they would probably rearrange it, and then ES&S's second column, I'm sure they would probably rearrange that.
That's pretty important because we have to make a decision pretty quickly.
Yes,
if they're going to rearrange numbers, we should find out as quickly as possible. That we need to have the absolute certain final numbers that they're willing.
Well, you're not going to get the absolute final numbers until you start contract negotiations.
Well, at least we know. I mean, Kathy's office should know what we need for an election and give them the specifications.
Well, and we have done that, and to the best of the ability, these are the comparisons as the proposals came back.
To me, it makes sense that the second column, Diebold at the top at 1.7 million would be the number that stands out. Is that correct?
If you wanted to go with Diebold, yes, that second column is the most advantageous. ES&S, in my opinion, the third column is very clearly the most advantageous.
Again, I'm still confused because if we did the lease, which is column 1, either way, it's either $2 million or $4 million in the end. If we do the purchase of the Diebold in column 2, our final cost for the upgraded system, because of the trade-in value of the state money, is $1.7 million. So am I missing something?
It doesn't make any real sense.
That seems to be, it stands out as the most, even though it's not a lease, it's a purchase of old equipment. In the end, the final cost for an updated system is $1.7 million. So, to me, that's kind of a no-brainer. Versus $4.5 million or versus $2 million. Or versus 1.9. It just, so either these numbers are wrong, or that's just such an obvious choice.
I understand your point is very valid. Under that arrangement that looks like.
I think that the reason you're seeing the discrepancies in these numbers are because it's an attempt by the industry to direct us towards a certain purchase option. Right. And I'll just tell you right now, I've lost faith in ES&S entirely, so I'm not going to look at their columns. And I don't care if it is $1 million cheaper. If it cost me $1 million to restore the voters' faith in our electric system, I'll write that check tomorrow.
Commissioner Mercer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm with Commissioner Thaxton with ES&S. I think they left us hanging. I think a couple of times they put us in bad positions, but that's certainly my opinion. Scott.
I'm willing to proceed along that line. The public trust is paramount, and the flaws in the existing system have been horrible. So I'd be willing to make a motion to proceed with negotiations with Diebold on either a lease or purchase utilizing the state system.
Second.
Okay, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye, motion carries unanimously.